Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Tintle and I am the owner and designer behind the Creative Siren. So this week I thought we would continue our little cutesy theme from last week's cactus and try something a little different but still within that same spectrum. So this week we are making narwhals. They're so cute, they make me smile. So I have these two options. You can either do it with cheeks or without cheeks. It's up to your preference, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So normally I use Super Sculpey in a lot of my sculpted cups, but I thought I'd try something a little bit different and use Ultralight, which is in the Sculpey family, but it weighs nothing and it feels like marshmallow fluff. It's a lot of fun to play with. So come with me, follow along, and let's make ourselves some cute little narwhals. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, first thing you want to do is start off with a fully prepped and sanded 12-ounce morning mug from the Steel Magnolia. And I also sanded the bottom because we're going to be painting that too. So this is our Ultralight Super Sculpey. I found that it doesn't stretch as well as regular Sculpey, so I'm just shaping it in the form of a rectangle so that I can roll it out in the shape that I need, which is just a really long rectangle so that I can wrap it around the mug. Once you've rolled out your clay, we're just going to cut straight lines. It doesn't have to be super perfect. It's just so that you don't have a whole bunch hanging off the tops and the bottoms, and so that your ends meet up pretty well. So just do your best to cut it as straight as possible. And once you've done that, go ahead and wrap it around your cup. Don't worry about that space if you have a space where the handle is, because we'll add a little piece there later. It's almost easier to add a piece secondary. And just press that clay into the mug. You'll want to put some firm pressure going from top to bottom on the mug so that you get out any air bubbles that may be underneath your clay. Now let's go ahead and roll out a small piece. It's going to be roughly 4 inches long and 1 inch wide, and this is going to go right underneath that handle part. And again, just trim off the edges so that you have, some straight edges. And just line it up with one edge of your clay, and you'll start to kind of blend it in and push it into each other. Now for the handle here, you'll just take a hobby knife and slit right around the middle on each side so that you can wrap that clay right around that handle. And then you can go ahead and go in and trim any excess around the handle. Don't worry if the handle isn't super clean, because we'll be putting clay over that area. Now just blend in that piece. What's really cool about this Super Sculpey or the Ultralight is that if you rub it with a good amount of pressure, you'll be able to get most blemishes out. So if you just kind of rub it back and forth, you can blend it in really nicely without leaving too many impressions. And if you need to, you can go in with just a tiny bit of rubbing alcohol to really blend in any lines, any bumps, any blemishes that you find. And then once you're happy with the way that your base looks, go ahead and trim the top and the bottom of your mug. This is where I find taping off the top is really helpful here, because then I can just glide my blade right across the bottom edge of my tape and it gives me a really straight line. Once you've cut off all the excess, go ahead and go in and just clean up those edges by rounding them out. You don't want to make it look like you just cut it off. You want it to kind of blend into the top and the bottom creases of your cup. Now that we're done with our base, we're going to go ahead and start moving into covering our handle. So we're going to cut 2 pieces of conditioned clay, and again we're trimming off those edges, and they're going to be about 1 inch in width. And this one here that's going on the underbelly of our handle is going to be 4 inches long, just like that middle section that we just cut out earlier. And once you get it on there, you'll just want to press it into the handle, making sure that it's sticking there, and trying to blend it really nicely with that handle. Also pressing firmly on the underbelly to make sure that you get out all the air that is trapped underneath. We don't want any air bubbles caught under there. Now cut a second one that's going to be roughly 5 inches long, and that's going to cover the top part of our handle. And go ahead and do the same thing as we did down below, where you press firmly to make sure there's no air trapped underneath our clay, and to attach it and blend it with that bottom part. And if you have one, I would highly recommend using a silicone tip tool to help blend in some of those edges that you can't reach with your finger. They are like magic. And go ahead and hit it real quick with just a tiny bit of rubbing alcohol on the end of your finger to help really blend in those edges. Now here we're going to go ahead and start forming the base of our narwhal's tail. So grab just a tiny piece of conditioned clay, and we're going to form it into a triangle. And we're going to fit it onto the very bottom of our handle here. And it's just going to form that base curvature of our tail. Now don't worry if your triangle here ends up being too wide. You can always go back in and trim it up so that it looks more natural and so it flows together. But right now we're just concerned with making sure that this piece is blended so you don't notice any of the lines. And don't be afraid of adding little bits of extra clay in areas that just aren't fully covered. That way it all just blends smoothly. You just don't want to see any large gaps. You really want the handle to look like one large cohesive piece of the tail. And be sure to do the same thing on the other side as well. So if you notice, the base of our tail doesn't have a whole lot of volume, so I'm going to roll out a little piece of clay here, and I'm actually going to roll out a second one as well. And I'm going to attach it to the very bottom of our mug, right where we started in with those little triangle pieces. And I'm going to slope it down so that it's a gradual slope from the base of the cup all the way to the base of the handle. And that way it just flows real cohesively together. And if you're having trouble blending in any of those lines, just grab a little bit of rubbing alcohol and put it on the tips of your fingers and rub it onto our clay. So rubbing alcohol will actually slightly eat away at the clay, which is why it works so well at blending all of those lines together. Now here I'm just going to add a little bit of extra clay, and I'm going to do this to both sides, and that way the base of our tail gradually forms into the body of our tail. And so it's just not like a steep slope from the handle to what we just added. And then don't forget to take some rubbing alcohol to the underbelly of our handle as well, so that it all looks really nice and smooth. Okay, this is where I told you we were going to cut some off, so not to worry too much about how big your base of the tail was, because we're just going to create a gradual slope from our handle, which is the actual body of our tail, to the base of our tail, and just a smooth, like real nice curvature. Now let's form our actual tail. So here I've taken a conditioned piece of clay that I've rolled out, and I'm just freehanding a tail. You guys can make this almost any way you want, but you really want to form it to look like a whale's tail. And I'm going to take this one that I just cut out, and I'm going to throw it right back on top and trace it so that they look as much alike as you can possibly get them. Now from here, you're going to smooth out a little bit of those edges and then fit it right at the very top of your mug. And you're going to put it upside down because we're actually going to fold it over. And you'll want to meet it really nicely at the top, configure it to where you want it, and use your silicone tip tool to help you adhere that top of your tail to the base clay that we've already added. And don't forget to shape out your tips of your fin, because sometimes they distort themselves. Now with this next piece, take your second piece of tail, you're going to cut it in half. This just makes it so much easier to line up. And you're going to take it from your ends and line it up inward into your handle. And then just press firmly. And do this to both sides. And it gets a little confusing, so you'll probably have to play with it for a minute to figure out which way it goes. I know I confused it a couple of times. And now just blend. You really want to thin out those edges so that it looks like the edge of a fin, since fins are really quite thin. And then don't lose your point, because the point, you know, is pretty important when it comes to the fin. And then use your silicone tip tool to help push down that clay so that it meets together, and then blend in the rest of it. And of course, we go back in with a little bit of rubbing alcohol to make sure that all of those lines look as smooth as possible. And what's really cool about using this technique with the two different fins is it makes the fin look really, really realistic, almost muscular, which I really, really like. Okay, now it's time to form the horn of our narwhal. And it's gonna be a stubby little horn, so start out with about a bouncy ball size of clay and just form it into a cone. And you'll just want to put a little bit more pressure on one end so it really forms that tip of a cone. And then slice the bottom part at a diagonal, because we want that horn to kind of sit straight or point up a little bit. And figure out where you want to put it, and then just smooth out those edges. So take your silicone tip tool and press those edges into the base clay that we have there so that they adhere together. Now here I'm just taking a needle tool and I'm running it all the way from the bottom to the very top of the horn to create that spiral look. Okay, now let's make his face. So I've rolled out a piece of conditioned clay, and I'm just taking the very end of my roller and cutting out 3 small round circles. And because my roller isn't very sharp, it does create a little bit of excess clay on the edge, so I'm just taking off the excess clay and then I'm smoothing out those edges so that they're not super rugged. Now take one of your little circles and you'll want to form a half circle, and so here I just used, again, my roller, and that's going to be the smile. So go ahead and place your 2 little circles, those are going to be our eyes, and figure out where you want to put them on the front of your cup and smooth everything out. Use your finger to smooth out those edges and round them out a little bit more. And then now we're going to do the same thing with our smile. So I smoothed out the edges before adding it and then pressed it on underneath the eyes. Now I'm using my silicone tip tool, and you don't see it here, but I'm actually dipping it in a little bit of rubbing alcohol to help smooth out any rough edges. Okay, now let's make his little fins. So I took like a super bouncy ball sized bit of clay and I've cut it in half. And I mean, that's about the perfect size that you want for his little stubby fins. And figure out where on the side of your mug that you really want to place them. You can place them closer to the front if that's where you want. I just did mine smack in the middle between his face and his tail. And then blend in those edges so that they adhere together. Now I didn't want it to come to a really big point at the top. I didn't want it sticking out too much. So I did flatten it out a little bit. And then I hit it with some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip to help really blend in those edges. And make sure you do that to both sides so that you have 2 little stubby fins. Once you're all done smoothing him out, we're going to go ahead and bake him. Be sure to remove any tape that you have at the top of your cup if you did so just like I did, and follow the packaging exactly for the correct temperature to bake him at. Once your narwhal is done baking and has fully cooled, we're going to tape off the top of our rim if you chose to tape it off in the first place, just because we're going to start painting and we don't want paint at the top of our rim. Now here I'm painting him with Bimini Blue from Apple Barrel, and I'm just going to paint all of him. The only thing that I'm not going to paint is the very bottom of the cup and his horn. You'll probably need anywhere between 2 to 3 coats of this paint in order to get a really nice and solid coverage. Once your blue paint has dried, go ahead and go in and paint the horn of your narwhal a really pretty gold. I'm using Folkart's Inca Gold for mine. Okay, now let's add some white to the underbelly of our narwhal. Now you'll notice where the cup and the clay meet, there is a very distinct line. And so I'll take my white right up until that line so it almost blends seamlessly and you'll never notice those seams. And I'm just outlining the whole underbelly. Now I'm taking it up through the body of the tail, but I'm not covering it completely. You'll want a little bit of blue to outline the white on either side. And the same goes for the fin. We're gonna add a little bit of white on that underbelly of the fin, and it's mostly gonna be covered, but you still want a little bit of white outline. You might need to go in with a smaller detailing brush to get those ends, but definitely leave an outline. Now once you finish the outline of all the white, go in and fill it in a little bit more so that it just looks nicer. Just clean up those edges and make sure that all of it fills in real fluidly and flows together. Now we're gonna do the top part of his belly, and we're gonna bring up, it's gonna look like a rainbow from one end to the other. Now here, I do find that it helps to hold him upside down to see if that half circle is even. Now once you've done that, go ahead and go back underneath him into the underbelly of his little stubby fins. And again, we're just doing half circles on both of those. And then meeting it up with the outline that we added earlier. Now fill in the rest of it. Again, you'll probably need roughly 2 to 3 coats of the white in order for it to show up all the way. Now it's really important for this next step that your underbelly is completely dry, because we're going to be taking 2 different ball tools, and they're each going to be varied sizes. So you'll want like a large, a medium, a small, and an extra small here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to blend in the line between the belly and the body of our narwhal. So take your largest ball tool and we're gonna run some dots. We're gonna start with the white and we're gonna run some dots right on that line. And make sure you have a rag just in case you need to wipe off any paint. This is just like an old art rag that I have. And we're gonna add dots. Go ahead and add some dots right on that belly line to create some negative space, and then right above that belly line. Now once you've added your big dots, now we'll move on to our medium dots and do the very same thing. And I'm just randomly placing them here. And once you've added your medium dots, again, we'll do it with the small dots, and lastly with the extra small, and just fill in space. It's just to give it a fun and whimsical, bubbly look. I honestly didn't know that narwhals are actually spotted, so this is to simulate those spots and the blending of those spots on his body. I really like to take my extra small one and I use that really as the filler and just add it everywhere. And as the paint starts to run out on the end of your ball tool, the dots will get smaller and smaller, almost creating like an extra small dot. Now once your white dots are dried, go ahead and do the very exact same with the blue. Put some right on that line there where the belly meets, and then just alternate between the different sizes of your ball tool. And now we'll just do the very same technique for the rest of his body. And just alternate between the blue and the white. Make sure that when you're doing that though, that one color is dry. So if you're starting with blue, for example, make sure that all of your blue dots are dry before you start mixing in the white. Otherwise, they could mix together or you'll get it all over your hands. Trust me, I've been there. Just be patient and let the paint dry. Once your dots are finished and dried, let's go ahead and take some black paint and we're gonna just paint the eyes and the mouth of our narwhal. You're gonna want a really fine detailing brush to help with this so that you don't accidentally get any black paint anywhere else. But that's all we're doing. It's real simple. Just paint his eyes all black and his mouth all black. Once his mouth and eyes are all dry, I'm gonna go in here with Candy Pink from Apple Barrel, and I'm just gonna give him a little tongue. In my opinion, this just ups the cutesy level for our little narwhal friend. And of course, last but not least, we're gonna take a ball tool and a little bit of white and we're gonna add some twinkle to his eyes. And that should finish the look for Mr. Narwhal. Now, if you wanna up the cuteness level just a little bit more, go ahead and take a paintbrush and add 2 little pink ovals with that same candy pink right under his eyes to give him the brightest, rosiest cheeks ever. Now once you're happy with the look of your narwhal, go ahead and tape off the top rim of your cup if you did so in the first place, and we're going to epoxy him. Now this can get a little tricky because this guy has a lot of little crevices that you want to make sure you don't miss. One in particular being the top of his horn, the other the bottom underbelly of his fin, and the top of his fin. So make sure you really get that in there. But overall, the other thing to remember is that though we're adding extra to those areas to make sure that there is full coverage, you really don't want to glob on the epoxy. For 3D sculpted tumblers, it's always best to go thinner rather than thicker. And once you have them fully covered, go ahead and hit them real quick with your heat gun to pop any micro bubbles that may have shown up. And that's it, guys. Now you have an adorable little narwhal friend to help you wake up in the morning, or even just to enjoy a nice cup of hot cocoa. Thank you so much for following along, and I can't wait to see all of your cute little narwhal friends. If you loved this video, be sure to click here to see our last video. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tutorial. See you later. Bye!